Ազատություն TV-ն շարունակում է իր ծրագրերը եւ այժմ մեր բացառիկյուրն է Dr. Henry Theriault, նա ցեղասպանության մասնագետ է, ընդհանրապես մարդու իրավունքների ճանաչված մասնագետ է Միացյալ Նահանգներում, նա ուրեմն նախագահն է, կոչվում է միջազգային ասոցիացիա ցեղասպանության գիտնականների միջազգային ասոցիացիա, այսպիսի կազմակերպություն կա եւ պարոն Theriault հենց այդ կազմակերպության նախագահն է Dr. Theriault, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. And now, tomorrow, Armenians will mark 150th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. And I would like to ask you, last year, the U.S. Congress, by almost unanimous vote, recognized the massacres of 1.5 million Armenians by Ottoman Turks as genocide. It took many years before the Congress recognized the genocide. Why did it take so long, do you think, and why it happened now?
I think there are two answers to that question. One is the very practical political side. I think in the United States, certainly Turkey has had quite a bit of political as well as military influence. And so not only have corporations, but also military and political interests in the United States have often sided with Turkey in downplaying or denying the Armenian genocide for their own purposes. I don't think that those interests in the United States believe that the genocide didn't happen, but out of political expediency and their own particular agendas, foreign policy and otherwise, they embrace Turkish denial as a way to gain favor and support Turkey in exchange for benefits from Turkey. That's been an ongoing problem, as is probably well known. So that's one challenge, and I think the other challenge was that there was a lack of commitment, I think, generally in the United States and elsewhere around the world for human rights issues. So that even though in some cases human rights concerns would overcome these other types of interests, because for a long time that wasn't the case, no matter how much people saw the issue as a human rights issue, no matter how much people understood the legacy of the genocide as something that needed to be dealt with, that was never a strong enough force or reason to overcome the efforts at denial for more cynical reasons. So that changed, I think, as the equation in the region in which Turkey sits has changed. Turkey has become less aligned with the United States in many ways. Erdogan has become more of a wild card and has pursued his own agenda at times with some animosity towards the United States. So I think that widened the gap between the U.S. political and military interests and Turkish political and military interests, which opened the door to the possibility of this change. I think the other reason that it took a long time, but now has happened, is that the reality of the genocide is that because of the destruction of the Armenian population, because of the loss of wealth and so forth, Armenians are in a weakened political, economic, and other situation around the world. And so even in the United States, where some people think Armenians have a very strong political lobby, it's certainly not as strong as some groups and not as strong as it would be otherwise. And I think it's taken many, many years to build the visibility, the connections, and the awareness, both in the political circles of the United States, and I think in the popular and more public sphere, and also in the academic realm, where people became aware enough and concerned enough about the Armenian genocide to really step forward and support. I think has happened now. I think the Armenian genocide is extremely well known in academic circles for people who deal with this issue, certainly within Holocaust studies, within genocide studies and so forth. the Armenian genocide is now not just a case of genocide that people know, but I would argue is a reference case. That is, it's one of the main genocides that people understand in the history of genocide and use to compare other cases of genocide to. I think one other small point is, along with that, the denial of the Armenian genocide, which has been pursued so vigorously by the Turkish government, as well as by what I would call mercenary scholars in the United States and elsewhere, has been studied a great deal and is very well known to scholars, political activists, and actually political leaders in the United States and beyond. And so that denial, because it's so well known and so criticized, doesn't have the power that it once did. People are not naive about denial anymore. And so the effect of the Turkish government and its allies' efforts to stop passage of this bill, to deny the genocide in popular and academic circles, really has decreased. And so I think with all those factors together, the time was right last year for finally for passage of this resolution.
Yes, and I guess the most important missing element here is the fact that Turkey still denies the crime committed by Ottoman government. And it seems to me this will be with us for many years to come. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think denial for Turkey has two dimensions. One is the obvious political and economic interest in preventing recognition because of fear, in my opinion, of reparations. I think Turkey is very afraid that if it admits the Armenian genocide, that there will be legal consequences, particularly around expropriated Armenian wealth. We know about the efforts to recover, for instance, church lands in Turkey, and I think there are broader questions that will come up for reparations. Mm-hmm. But I think at the same time, and this has actually become worse in the last 5 years, denial of the Armenian genocide is unfortunately tied very closely to a fragile Turkish national self-image, mm-hmm. An image that often presents Turkey in an impossibly positive light. No country is free from human rights violations, but Turkey presents itself internationally as this incredibly untainted and perfect country. And the glaring truth of the Armenian genocide undercuts this image that it presents and its own self-image. And I think that because of the propagandizing of the Turkish population and the way in which the education system, the political system, and so forth in Turkey function, and even the cultural fabric of Turkey, that many Turkish people cannot admit the reality of the Armenian genocide because it will undermine their very false sense of what Turkish identity is, this very flawed idea about Turkish identity. And unfortunately, what that means is that what I would consider the true, really impressive Turkish people who not only recognize the Armenian genocide, but recognize an obligation for reparations, those people who are really the beacons of hope in Turkey are marginalized and ignored. And a more positive idea of Turkish national identity that recognizes what Turkey has done in the past and recognizes the need to work with Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians to address the genocidal past, that tendency, which would be very healthy for Turkey, is suppressed in favor of a very narrow and very, in my estimation, actually pathetic ultra nationalism that really continues to harm Turkey as much as it harms Armenians and others who are victimized by it.
And Dr. Theriault, also there is another historical irony that as we see that Turkey becomes more autocratic and having more problems with the world, the chances are getting better for the recognition politics. I mean, you see more and more democracies go ahead and recognize the genocide, even the autocracies in the Middle East. They're also condemning a genocide committed by Ottoman Turkey. And but this is, but on the other hand, we see that Turkish president is coming up every year with its own proclamation. It's like, you know, alternative to the US president's proclamation, in which he never, of course, recognizes the crimes committed by the Ottoman Empire. But on the other hand, he tries to say that, you know, we're very sorry what happened then, it was a war, you know. And he's like, again, this proclamation that he issues every year on April 24, these are another form, you know, more shrewd, smart forms of denials, right?
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a subtler form of denial. I think it's impossible to outright deny that Armenians suffered significantly, you know, in the late Ottoman Empire and in the early Turkish national period. I think that the historical record is so clear. So the best that Turkey can do to try to look credible in denying the Armenian genocide is to take the kind of line that Erdogan has taken, which is to try to relativize suffering, to try to recognize, without actually going as far as recognizing this as a case of one-sided mass violence by a government against a minority group that clearly qualifies as genocide, and in fact is one of the cases that Raphael Lemkin had clearly in his mind, as he stated during his lifetime, as a classic example of genocide that was the basis of his concept of genocide, of creating the word genocide. And I think Erdogan is a very shrewd politician. He knows that if he gave a naive, extreme form of denial, it would be apparent to everyone and he would not be able to have any credibility. So he adopts a subtler approach. I think you're exactly right. I still think at this point that it's not very effective. Even that subtler approach is not very effective at this point.
Yeah, and we still don't have the statement by the White House, and the chances are very low that US President will call it a genocide this year. We expect almost the same statement as last year. Maybe he will include some passages about US Congress's resolution, maybe, but Armenians are not hopeful that Donald Trump will say something really extraordinary. Will pronounce, finally, will say G word, genocide. What's your take on that?
I agree with you. I think his own personal financial as well as psychological interests align too much with Turkey, with Azerbaijan. He's, stated that he sees Erdogan in a very positive light, which is a problem. I would also add that as somebody from the United States, in one sense, I'm relieved that Donald Trump wouldn't be the first sitting president to recognize the Armenian genocide. I think that would carry some baggage for Armenians, because his record on human rights, both within the United States and internationally, is extremely poor. I think the fact that he does not recognize the Armenian genocide actually in one strange way is a confirmation of the importance of this case and the legitimacy of this case.
Dr. Theriault, also every year hundreds of thousands of Armenians around the world march to the genocide memorials, if they have one in their cities, or go to the city halls and protest loudly and commemorate the victims. But this year is different. The coronavirus makes us stay at home and light a candle, and as you know, it will happen in Armenia, and remember the victims in a unique way. And this year, Armenian Americans, instead of usual marching in the streets of New York, Los Angeles, they decided to donate money to the US hunger relief organizations, helping 2.5 million Americans. What do you think? How important is this in symbolic way? What's your take on this? initiative?
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question, and I would say first that globally, Armenian people's commitment to continuing commemoration of the Armenian genocide and actually increasing political action, particularly toward reparations for the Armenian genocide, has been extremely strong. I think the Turkish government thought that after the 100th anniversary, that this political action would lessen, that the issue would become less important, and to non-Armenians it would become less important. What we've seen is actually the opposite, as evidenced by the US Congress's passage of the genocide resolution last year, that there is a sense of even stronger commitment. I don't think that 1 year of changing the form of remembrance of the Armenian genocide will have a very strong impact. Quite the opposite. I think that in fact it will allow Armenians to recognize and remember the genocide in a different way from how we have before, and that will be a positive change. And I think also more practically, it will help Armenians develop new ways of outreaching regarding the Armenian genocide, particularly in using electronic media in ways perhaps the community has not used before around the world, and that those tools will actually become very useful in the future. So the idea of having very strong virtual commemorations alongside, I hope next year, very strong in-person commemorations will actually perhaps double the impact of the commemorations and allow for an even stronger global recognition of the Armenian genocide.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Theriault, as a strong advocate of the international recognition of the Armenian genocide, what is your message for the Armenians here, proper in Armenia?
I can only say that, again, in this difficult time of COVID-19, of the economic challenges and the political challenges and military challenges that Armenia continues to face, and certainly in Artsakh and elsewhere, that we are seeing at once the fruits of not just decades, but really a century of struggle for justice for the Armenian genocide, not just recognition, but also reparations. We are seeing that today the case is even stronger than it was 20 or 30 years ago, which is very different from most cases of post-genocide victim groups. And I think that's extremely important. I think what we're also seeing is a level of vindication. The Turkish government and military have adopted in recent years very aggressive policies that blatantly violate human rights, that target civilians, and that actually engage in mass killing. We saw this from the 1980s on against the Kurds, and that was something that was known to some people, was certainly known to Armenians, but I think now globally, Turkey has revealed itself as maintaining some of the very ideology and attitudes that drove the Armenian genocide and the genocide against Greeks and Assyrians in the first place. And more than anything else, Turkey has confirmed its own genocidal mentality against its own denial. But Armenians can also be proud of struggling against Turkey in a way that now really serves many other groups as well, and really serves humanity, to highlight the danger of Turkish military and political aggression and disregard for human rights. And I think we now can see ourselves as a beacon warning the world about the dangers of Turkish aggression.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Theriault. Thank you for your contribution to this sad day.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm deeply honored by the chance to speak with you, and really appreciate your thoughtful questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.